Right now, it's the end for the Shahed. The sky over Ukraine has become a deadly trap. The drones aren't making it through. The Ukrainian armed forces have turned on an invisible meat grinder. The sky has been completely sealed off after this Ukrainian decision. The enemy is losing its last trump card. A sensation. Europe is lining up for Ukrainian weapons. Ukraine is building a new security architecture. Kyiv is turning into the arms capital of Europe. A new military alliance against the Russian Federation is already taking shape. The Russian fleet is at the bottom. Ukraine has unleashed an invisible killer. The maritime nightmare has been activated. Putin's ships are disappearing from the radar one after another. The new Ukrainian weapon is breaking everything. The Kremlin is in panic. Geoshock. Erdogan is openly playing against Moscow. Turkey is rewriting the rules. The Kremlin is losing allies. The Russian Federation is caught in a trap. The White House is shaking. The elites are in panic. Donald Trump is losing control. Political crash in the USA. Marco Rubio is coming out of the shadows. A new leader is pushing forward. Trump is under attack. Washington is preparing for a shakeup. And all of this is in our new episode. Hotspot. The sky has been cleared. Shaheds are no longer in control. The armed forces of Ukraine carried out a real technological crackdown and broke the enemy's main trump card. Kamikaze drones that had terrorized cities for months are now crashing en masse, failing to reach their targets. Ukrainian forces have implemented a deadly combination. What are these invisible shields and why has panic broken out among the enemy? Find out in our report.
Shaheds are now banned from flying. Ukraine is fortifying the defense of its skies against Russian attack drones. In March, the occupiers launched a record number of drones, but the Ukrainian armed forces also set a record.
Monthly infographic on Shahed 136, Garan 2 and Gerbera UAVs. March results. Record. A total of 6,462 units. 5,833 shot down, or 90%. 629 reached their targets, or 10%. The average number of launches per day is 208 units, plus 15%.
The secret of the success of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Interceptor drones. According to Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky, the effectiveness of combat sorties by unmanned interceptors increased by almost 55% in the spring. Since
the beginning of spring, our UAV interceptors have already destroyed more than 2,300 enemy aerial targets. The enemy does not stop its attacks. On the contrary, it is increasing production, modernizing drones, and improving their use.
After Mikhailo Fedorov was appointed Minister of Defense, Kyiv made significant progress in the development and implementation of unmanned systems. Today, Ukrainian defense industries produce dozens of various interceptors. Some of them, for example, are the Octopus or UEP. One operates on the basis of artificial intelligence, while others, such as the Sting, can be controlled by an operator from hundreds of kilometers away.
An absolute world record. A pilot shot down a Shahed drone using a Sting interceptor at a distance of 500 kilometers, utilizing Hornet vision control technology. Roman Kalk from the Bulava unit shot down 2 Shahed drones that were 500 kilometers away from him.
And it's not just about interceptors. Countering Russian weapons of terror is being carried out. A comprehensive approach is used. Anti-aircraft missile systems, helicopters armed with machine guns, as well as mobile ground fire groups all remain relevant. In addition, businesses and private companies have joined in the defense of Ukrainian airspace, as the government has allowed them to create their own air defense units.
The experimental project launched by the government to involve the private sector in the air defense system is already being implemented and is showing its first results. One of the companies participating in the project has already prepared its own air defense group. As of today, several enemy drones have already been shot down in the Kyiv region, specifically Shahed and Zala drones.
The armed forces of Ukraine are also not forgetting that the best defense is a good offense. Over the past week, drone forces have carried out at least 3 successful strikes on Shahed launch sites.
A sensation, Ukrainian weaponry is becoming the main hit in global security. While the Kremlin threatens Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, Kyiv is launching a counteroffensive on the diplomatic front. Ukraine is not just defending itself, it is ready to arm its neighbors and create a new containment belt against the Russian Federation. European capitals are lining up for technologies that truly work on the battlefield. Here are the details.
Ukrainian defense technologies are conquering the world. Ukrainian President Zelensky stated that Ukrainian defense enterprises will be built not only in Europe but also in Middle Eastern countries.
We are talking about a decade-long cooperation. We have signed the corresponding agreement with Saudi Arabia. We have also signed a 10-year agreement with Qatar, and we will sign a 10-year agreement with the Emirates as well. Over these 10 years, we will be engaged in co-production. We will build factories and production lines both in Ukraine and in these countries.
At a joint plant in Germany, the Ukrainian AI-powered reconnaissance drone Linza is already being produced, with plans to reach 10,000 units per year.
We also benefit from this. We are learning thanks to the large amount of data and experience that Ukraine is gaining on the battlefield. In the drone sector, everything changes very quickly, sometimes within just a few weeks or months, and this is important both for Ukraine and for us.
And at the joint venture in the United Kingdom, the much-needed Octopus interceptor drones are being produced, now essential not only for Ukraine.
I am pleased to announce that Ukrainian engineers are working together with British engineers in the UK, and I am happy to say that we are starting production of these improved drones and interceptors this month. And next, we will begin deliveries to Ukraine, and we aim to produce more than 1,000 drones per month for your soldiers.
At a meeting with the EU Defense Commissioner, Defense Minister Fedorov stated that this is not the limit, and the number of joint ventures for drones, long-range missiles, and even air defense systems will only continue to grow.
Today we heard announcements totaling nearly $38 billion. These funds are going specifically toward the air defense system. For drones, for the development of drone assault units, for deep strike, for interceptor drones. In
the field of unmanned aerial vehicles, Ukraine is developing at a record pace. The company Firepoint announced a revolutionary upgrade of their middle strike and deep strike drones, which will now carry almost twice as much explosives while also becoming cheaper.
We will make it so that the FP1 will carry over 1,000 kilometers. We've already done it. We moved the fuel tank into the wing, and it will carry 105 kilograms for 1,000 kilometers. Similarly, the wing tank will allow us to significantly increase the payload of the FP2 up to about 158 kilograms. There will be a payload. We still hope to lower the price. We've found some solutions that will allow us to completely do away with expensive CRP antennas and GNSS receivers, and that will be a major breakthrough.
Amidst such successes, there have also been several scandals. The head of the German company Rheinmetall, Paperger, stated that Ukrainian drones are assembled like Lego by housewives in their kitchens, and that this is not the level of real defense technology. The president of Ukraine responded to this criticism with humor.
If every housewife in Ukraine can produce drones, then every housewife in Ukraine can be the director of Rheinmetall. And I congratulate our defense industry on this high level.
On the American TV channel Fox News, Ukrainian drones were mistakenly presented as their own. They showed Sting drones, Wild Hornets, as American technology. Of course, in the next broadcast, they had to correct themselves.
And to make it even more convincing, Ukraine will support us. They combined the most advanced anti-drone technologies developed to counter Iranian drone swarms since the time of Putin's invasion. Zelensky says he wants to help. Maybe you could offer us those Hornets? The Ukrainians have created these excellent, inexpensive, fast and maneuverable kamikaze drones.
The war in Ukraine has sparked a true revolution in technology, and Ukrainian engineers and military specialists have become the leading experts whom top armies around the world look to for help and want to learn from.
The Kremlin is in a panic, and the world has been shaken by a new retaliatory strike from the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukraine is once again breaking the mold and pulling out a trump card that no one was prepared for. On the horizon is a technology capable of wiping out the Russian fleet completely. Ukrainian engineers have produced a development that chills the enemy to the bone. This weapon strikes suddenly, accurately, and from the very depths of the sea. The enemy fleet turns into a target with no chance of escape. What is this underwater nightmare that is already changing the rules of naval warfare? See all the details right now. It is impossible to see, almost impossible to detect. If it locks onto a target, there is no time left to react. Ukrainian developers have presented something that until recently seemed impossible. The underwater stealth device Kronos is capable of operating covertly, autonomously, and striking where the enemy least expects it.
These are true engineering masterpieces when it comes to reconnaissance, sabotage operations, or highly effective strike drones, including both precision-guided and unguided variants.
Kronos is not a classic submarine and not just a drone, but a hybrid platform that combines several functions at once, from covert reconnaissance to a full-scale strike operation. The submarine is capable of reaching up to 50 kilometers per hour underwater, up to 80 kilometers per hour on the surface, diving to a depth of up to 100 meters in standard mode, and withstanding critical loads down to 250 meters. But the key feature is not the speed or even the depth, but its low detectability.
And not just for radars, but also for echo sounders, sonars, and marine radars. Because the hull of the submarine is made of composites, meaning non-metallic materials. And
that means we're not just talking about technology, but about a new level of warfare where the enemy might not even know where the strike came from. At the same time, Kronos is not just about stealth, but also about power. The vessel is equipped with 6 torpedoes capable of striking targets at distances of up to 3 kilometers, turning this compact platform into a fully fledged combat tool. But perhaps even more important is its autonomy. The submarine can be remotely controlled from more than 250 kilometers away, effectively turning it into a next-generation maritime drone capable of carrying out missions without direct crew involvement.
It can carry up to 11 people on board. The crew of the boat can be minimal, just 3 people.
At the same time, Ukraine is also betting on another type of weapon that can shift the balance. Not just at the tactical level, but at the strategic level. We're talking about its own ballistic capabilities. This is an area that remained in the shadows for a long time, but today is increasingly coming to the forefront.
We're talking about 2 such major niches. The first is so-called tactical ballistics with a range of up to 200 kilometers. The second is essentially strategic ballistics with a range of up to 850 kilometers.
According to experts, Ukraine is already in the final stages of developing a whole range of ballistic solutions. This is not about a single project, but several lines being worked on by different teams at the same time.
This is specifically the so-called Hrom complex. There is information that it is in the final stages of testing. This means that Ukraine may receive a whole range of different ballistic missiles with ranges up to 500 kilometers and up to 850 kilometers. And this could become a significant strategic turning point.
In fact, this means that not only frontline positions will come under attack, but also deep military facilities, depots, logistical hubs, and the infrastructure that supports the entire system of warfare. Russia is physically unable to shield its entire territory from such strikes, which means a vulnerability appears that did not exist before. If underwater Ukraine relies on stealth and surprise, then in the air it relies on range and the inevitability of the strike. Together, this forms a new model of warfare, where the decisive factor is not the amount of equipment, but the ability to find the enemy's weak spots, and to strike where the enemy is not prepared to defend.
A geopolitical blow to the Kremlin's back. Erdogan is increasing his support for Ukraine. Ankara is taking on the role of a key arbiter and is offering its platform for negotiations between Kyiv and Moscow. But behind this lies a much deeper calculation. Turkey is strengthening its influence in the region while simultaneously weakening Russia's position. For the Kremlin, this is a worrying signal. Allies are starting to play by their own rules. What is behind this maneuver and how could it change the balance of power? Stay tuned.
Zelensky is in Turkey again. However, this time the discussion was not only about peace negotiations. Now Ukraine is a full-fledged ally and security partner. On his Facebook page, the Ukrainian leader stated that the relevant decisions at the state level have already been made.
In 2022, everyone was talking about the Turkish barrier Qatar, which even here, they were building a factory in Ukraine and we were adopting their drone technologies. Now the Turks will be adopting ours. 4 years have passed. In this sense, much has changed.
Here, analysts say it's important not just to sell your products, but also to sign long-term contracts. Then when it comes to Turkey, it is necessary to build cooperation wisely so that the partnership does not turn into competition.
Both Ukraine and Turkey produce drones. This means that it is necessary to coordinate so that these drone supplies to the Middle East region do not negatively affect the partner. I'm speaking from the Ukrainian side as well. But Ukraine has extensive experience in conducting combat operations. Now, this situation is already somewhat different, because when it comes to producing a drone, that is not always going to be enough to defend against another drone.
At the same time, perhaps the main thing Ukraine can offer is not just the drones themselves, but the experience of countering drones and missiles using cheaper methods than those typically used in NATO. This, so to speak, is a model of air defense. Turkey, in what sense? Ankara, which has already repelled Iranian missiles 3 times, is now extremely...
This is something that I find absolutely fascinating, and I am definitely very interested in learning much more about all of the specific details regarding this particular subject matter right now, as I believe it holds incredible value and importance for my future understanding of the entire field. It is entirely possible to fight against heavily armed conventional military forces and a well-prepared army, including attack helicopters, heavy battle tanks, and various armored vehicles using only small forces and significantly more affordable and accessible tactical equipment. In fact, these massive assets can be successfully countered and effectively neutralized by using comparatively cheaper and more efficient drones.
This was discussed at the meeting of the presidents and about negotiations. Zelensky and Erdogan confirmed that Istanbul could become the new venue for a trilateral meeting in the Ukraine-USA-Russia format.
Negotiations were held in Turkey in 2022, as we can recall, and in 2025 they also began in the summer, specifically in Turkey. Moreover, Turkey, unlike the United Arab Emirates, played a more active role there. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was essentially the moderator of the negotiations.
It is worth noting that earlier, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov, traveled to Turkey on a visit. There he held a meeting with the Turkish Minister of Defense Yaşar Güler. There, developments in humanitarian and defense cooperation between Kyiv and Ankara were discussed. However, analysts believe that was not the only topic of conversation.
I am deeply convinced that there are so-called facade topics that he discusses in Turkey at his own level, at the level of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and at the level of the Minister of Defense. This includes Turkey as a negotiation platform, as well as the issue of prisoner exchanges. But I'm deeply convinced that there are also topics that do not make it into official media reports.
Among these are the following. For example, experts mention Ukraine's overall role in the Middle East. After all, once the war in Iran ends, many things will change. In particular, this concerns trade, defense, maritime transport, and more. This is where Kyiv gets a chance to become a full-fledged player in the region, and it's better to discuss this in advance.
President A is being taken to Turkey. This is not just talk about peaceful mediation. It's about military cooperation and economic relations. During this visit, I am sure the war in Iran and the shifting balance of power in the Middle East and the Near East were discussed. Ukraine is a key player on the Asian map. This is a moment that, in principle, finally allows us to talk not just about international subjectivity, about a certain soft power that Ukraine possesses.
In return, already today, Ukraine is gaining a reliable partnership with Turkey, which has once again confirmed that it does not dispute our territorial integrity. And considering recent meetings, it is clear that Turkey will also take a more active role as a peacemaker.
Washington is shaking, the political volcano has awakened, while Donald Trump is drowning in a flood of lawsuits, scandals, and publicity. With record-high disapproval ratings, a new predator is appearing on the horizon. Marco Rubio is rapidly increasing his influence and is, in fact, launching a covert presidential campaign. His activity is already going beyond diplomacy and increasingly resembles a tough pre-election sprint. A regrouping is beginning among the elites, and America may be on the verge of a political upheaval. Who is betting on Rubio, and why is this a threat to the old guard? Find out right now. It looks like a serious confrontation is brewing across the ocean. Donald Trump's dark horse is unexpectedly stepping out of the shadows and rapidly turning into one of the key players in the battle for the legacy of the 47th president.
Trump's current approval rating is the lowest. In other words, there has never been such a low approval rating for presidents of the United States during their first year in office.
Against the backdrop of Trump's own declining ratings, an increasingly noticeable struggle for influence, control, and essentially for the future of the entire MAGA camp is beginning within his own movement. At the Conservative Political Action Conference, which is considered a kind of barometer of the mood among Trump's most loyal electorate, the voting results showed an unexpected dynamic. The formal leader remains J.D. Vance. With 53%, Vice President J.D. Vance is the favorite to receive the Republican nomination for president in 2028. The Hill? However, what is far more important is not his position, but the rapid rise of another player, Marco Rubio, who over the course of a year increased his support almost 12-fold, from 3% to 35%. Moreover, Rubio's position is not just strengthening, he is consistently capturing an audience that was previously considered monolithic, pushing out ideologues like Steve Bannon, while simultaneously taking away part of the support from Vance, who for a long time was seen as Trump's main political heir.
We must not fall into the trap set by our opponents. This is something the administration should consider. They are constantly trying to provoke these disagreements, a civil war in the White House. They are trying to drive a wedge between, I don't know, the Vice President and the Secretary of State.
At the same time, the key difference is that Rubio acts carefully, avoiding direct conflict with Trump himself, but gradually occupies the space around him, strengthening his position where others have either already lost or failed to gain a foothold.
In fact, Donald Trump is pitting Rubio and Vance against each other, and he really enjoys it.
The turning point for Rubio was the war in Iran that began with the United States. Since the start of the operation, the Secretary of State has effectively become the main face of the American administration on the international stage. He holds briefings for Congress, appears on Sunday talk shows, builds diplomatic coalitions, and delivers ultimatums to Tehran.
I hear a lot of talk that we supposedly don't have clear objectives. Here they are, you can write them down. First, the destruction of their air force. Second, the destruction of their navy. Third, a sharp reduction of their missile capability and their launchers. And fourth, the destruction of their factories, so that they cannot produce new missiles and new drones to threaten us in the future. Against this backdrop,
Vice President J.D. Vance finds himself in a much more complicated role. He maintains the formal status of the party base's favorite, but increasingly appears to be a figure pushed out of key informational and political processes. According to the Wall Street Journal, in recent months, Trump has been increasingly discussing J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio in private circles, essentially comparing their political potential. Officially, this is presented as informal conversations and even as a game for the future, but in reality, according to sources, it looks more like a test of loyalty, influence, and the ability to mobilize the core of the MAGA movement.
Trump is deliberately keeping the question of his successor open. He calls both politicians fantastic. He suggests an imaginary ticket for future elections, President Flynn and Vice President Rubin, as if they would be unbeatable, but he refrains from officially nominating either of them, analysts believe. In fact, for the first time in a long while, MAGA is not forming a vertical structure with a single center of power, but rather a field of competition, where the struggle to determine the future of the movement after Trump is beginning. And if just yesterday it seemed that the script had already been written and the successor chosen, today it is clear that the battle is only just beginning. And its outcome could change not only the balance of power within the Republican Party, but the entire political architecture of the United States. A public humiliation in the heart of the Kremlin. Pashinyan gave the Russian elite a cold shower right on their own turf. A tough conversation about democracy, free elections, and open social networks without censorship. And all of this right to Putin's face. The contrast with the reality in Russia sounded like a bolt from the blue. This démarche was not just a statement, it was a signal of a rupture. All the details are in the report. Two friends met in the Kremlin, or more accurately, two former friends. Pashinyan came to Moscow to resolve important issues and even managed to troll Putin a little.
It seems to me that the main interested party here is, of course, the Kremlin. It's also clear why Pashinyan can't refuse. Armenia is geographically situated in such a way that, of course, it needs good relations with Russia. But the Armenian-Azerbaijani war and Russia's non-intervention in this situation showed that today Putin is incapable of anything. And as an ally, he is absolutely worthless.
Of course, all attention is focused on this, the upcoming parliamentary elections in Armenia, which are of great interest to the Russian dictator.
There are many political forces that are pro-Russian. Of course, I'll be completely honest with you. We really wanted all these various established political parties in politics were able to actively participate and engage in this complex political and domestic political process during the nationwide democratic election cycles.
Is Putin really clinging to his last hopes of gaining control over the country?
Putin is doing everything he can to influence every election he can affect, and by well-known methods he does influence them.
But even in this case, Pashinyan gave a tough response to the dictator and shattered his rosy dreams.
He says it's not about needing Armenian passports. No. He puts it more subtly, saying that if you stuff people with Russian passports in here, only those with a single citizenship can be elected. And that's it. Goodbye.
Although, of course, strangely enough, any interference in Armenia's elections is denied by the Kremlin itself.
Look, European representatives see Moscow's interference in everything. Everywhere and in everything.
And of course, there's always talk about enemies. Putin is essentially warning that the course toward the EU could cost Yerevan too much. From cheap gas to political pressure.
We understand that every country seeks the maximum benefits from cooperation with third countries. But it should be obvious, it should be fair, agreed upon in advance, as they say, settled from the start. Actually, being in a formal customs union with both the European Union and the Eurasian Economic Union is simply considered impossible. It's simply impossible.
But it seems that this is where the Prime Minister pushed back against Putin. And within the walls of the Kremlin, he told him to get lost.
As long as there is an opportunity to combine these agendas, we will do so. And when the processes develop to the point where a decision needs to be made, I am confident that the citizens of the Republic of Armenia will make that decision.
It seems that Putin is losing an ally and a member of his Eurasian Economic Union, who doesn't even deny that they might shift course toward Western countries.
What's so great about being in a union with Putin anyway? The only thing Putin openly talks about is that we have lower gas prices. And Pashinyan is probably thinking, what if tomorrow everything gets bombed and you end up without any gas at all, and that's that? Obviously, of course, from a strategic perspective, moving closer to the European Union is much more appealing.
Freedom, independence, and democracy, words that make Putin's eyes pop out of his head. But against the backdrop of constant internet shutdowns in Russia,
it's all for your safety. Go ahead, switch to Max and V-Contact. Go to hell with your Max and your V-Contact.
Pashinyan decided to boldly tease the Kremlin boss with words that trigger him and reminded everyone of the delights of Putinism.
There are many citizens who think that there is perhaps too much democracy in Armenia. But for us, this is a fundamental matter of principle. Our social networks, for example, are completely and entirely 100% free. There are absolutely no limitations or restrictions at all.
The final rift between the countries occurred in 2022 when fighting broke out on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Moreover, the clashes were already taking place on Armenian territory itself. However, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which includes Russia, did not intervene.
At this particular moment in time, we are currently not participating in any CSTO activities for a very straightforward and fundamental reason. The truth is that we still cannot adequately explain to the people of our nation and to our fellow citizens exactly why the CSTO did not respond in the past and why it has not responded to our needs since then.
Meanwhile, protests against the Prime Minister took place in the center of Moscow. Is it really just a performance? He dedicated death to the people. Such bold answers. The Armenian Prime Minister is being pushed to the idea that the country no longer needs Russia's help or Putin's so-called support.
Putin is spending so much energy on the war with Ukraine that he simply has no strength left for anything else. And that's why when those who used to be allies, partners, call Putin whatever you like, when they have problems, Putin can't help anyone. And allies are falling away, each with varying degrees of activity.
And the most surprising thing is that we are witnessing this dialogue. The Kremlin has essentially brought this conversation into the public sphere itself, a conversation that is unlikely to score any points for Putin. Is the situation with allies really so bad that even moments like this are being broadcast? And it seems that the circle of friends around him is getting smaller and smaller. That's all for now. For more breaking news, tune in to the next episode.